If you stop today, who will hold everything together? That question doesn't arrive loud. It arrives quietly, usually at night, when the house is silent, when everyone else is resting, and your mind refuses to slow down. Maybe that thought is what keeps you awake. Not because you want to stay alert, but because you feel you can't afford to rest. You support the household. You take care of people. You solve problems, visible ones, invisible ones. And over time you learn to swallow your tiredness, not because it disappeared, but because someone always needs you. You wake up before the day truly begins and go to sleep after it's already over for everyone else. While others disconnect, your thoughts keep working. Bills, schedules, decisions no one sees being made. You became the anchor, the stable ground, the one who can't fall. And slowly, without noticing, strength stopped being a choice and became an obligation. Rest stopped feeling like relief and started feeling like risk, like guilt, because if you stop, everything might fall apart, or at least that's what your mind keeps telling you, again and again and again. You carry more than tasks. You carry expectations, pressure, the silent promise of never failing. You solve problems before they even appear. You improvise stability, even when something inside you is starting to give way. You smile while holding worries. You say, "I'm fine," while your chest tightens, and the exhaustion doesn't come only from what you do. It comes from what you hold back, from always being the strong one, the responsible one, the one who can endure a little more. Day after day, you swallow your own limits because someone needs you to keep going, needs you consistent, needs you standing. And along the way, you almost forgot about yourself, not out of neglect, but out of priority. Others came first. Tiredness became routine. Silence became company. Strength became duty. You learned to function even when empty, to endure, without support, because stopping never felt like an option. Resting felt dangerous. Slowing down felt irresponsible, as if everything depended on you, as if one pause would be enough for the world to crumble. And that thought, quietly, kept you trapped in motion. But listen, slowly, without rushing. God never asked you to be irreplaceable. He never placed the weight of the world on your shoulders. This belief that you must hold everything together didn't come from him. It came from fear, from pressure, from comparison. God doesn't build on exhaustion. He builds on trust, on surrender, on limits being honored. You were not created to function without pause, to control everything, to sustain everything. There is a rest that isn't escape. It's obedience. There is a stopping that isn't weakness. It's faith. When you slow down, God remains God. Responsibilities don't disappear, but they no longer crush you, because there is a difference between responsibility and a burden that was never yours to carry. Letting go isn't abandoning, it's trusting. If everything depends on you, that isn't strength, it's too much weight. This moment isn't about giving up. It's about learning to rest without guilt, to pause without fear, to trust without pretending everything is okay. If you feel like you're carrying more than you should, stay here, stay with me. In silence, little by little, you began to carry more than you should, not out of pride, not out of a need to control, but because it felt easier to let it be you. You thought you could handle it, and most of the time you did. You solved problems, you absorbed pressure, you didn't complain. And quietly, people adjusted. They trusted, they leaned on you. They placed on your shoulders what was never meant to be yours alone, and you accepted, not because you wanted recognition, but because someone needed to hold things together. Someone needed to stay strong. Someone needed to keep everything from falling apart. And while others rested and confident that you would manage, you learned how to be tired in silence, how to smile outwardly while feeling worn down inside, until exhaustion felt normal, like part of your identity, like the cost of being reliable, like the unspoken role you were meant to play. Over time, saying no started to feel wrong, almost selfish, almost like a failure of character. You convinced yourself that if you stopped, everything would collapse, that if you loosened your grip, no one else would step in. So you stayed, even drained, even unsure, even sensing that parts of you were being postponed. You placed everyone and everything first, except yourself, and life continued, supported by your strength, your consistency, your constant availability, until without noticing, your value became tied to usefulness, to productivity, to endurance. Rest began to feel dangerous, like a weakness instead of a necessity, and somewhere along the way, the soul began to whisper, quietly, persistently, asking for relief, not through screams, but through fatigue, discouragement, and a deep desire to stop, because carrying everything was never the plan. Being the foundation of all things was never the calling. God never designed paths that depend on one person alone. He does not create burdens meant to crush. He creates processes meant to teach. And when everything seems to rest on you, it may not be strength. It may be excess. It may be time to remember that being important does not mean being the only one. Even pillars need support, pauses, care. Still, you fix what breaks, you chase what's missing, you lift those who fall, and even tired, you continue. Because stopping feels unsafe, because you live with the fear that if you fail, everything collapses, and this fear grows quietly. The fear of not being allowed to get sick, to make mistakes, to rest. This is how survival replaces living. Days begin tired, nights end planning tomorrow, not from discipline, but from fear of losing control. And slowly, life becomes maintenance, not presence. But understand this clearly now. Being needed all the time is not a calling. It is a warning. God did not place you in the world to replace Him. You are not responsible for holding everything together. You are not the provider of the universe. You are a child. And when you try to occupy a place that was never yours, the cost is always the same. Exhaustion, anxiety, guilt. That is why rest feels heavy, why stopping feels wrong. Your body pauses, but your mind keeps running, whispering that you should be doing more, that something is unfinished, that now is not the time. This guilt was learned, built slowly, through the belief that value comes from effort, love from sacrifice, recognition from endurance. So resting feels like failure. But rest is not something you earn. It is not a reward. It is a human need. And respecting limits is not weakness. It is wisdom, because nothing is ever fully resolved. There will always be demands, worries, needs. And if you wait for the perfect moment to stop, you never will, until the body demands payment, the mind accelerates, and the heart hardens, not because of weakness, but because of excess. And faith, real faith, was never control. Faith is trusting, even when outcomes are uncertain, knowing that you are not alone, even when you let go, even when you rest. When you confuse faith with control, you end up distancing yourself from true trust, because when you try to control, you carry the weight of the outcome. You feel responsible for everything that happens, but trusting is different. Trusting is letting go of control. It's surrendering what doesn't fit in your hands. Perhaps the feeling of guilt when you try to rest comes from this. You feel that if you're not in control, everything will crumble, and that's the lie you need to break. Faith is not about controlling. Faith is trusting in what God has already done and knowing that He will do what is necessary to take you to the end of the journey. In the next point, we'll talk about how God never asked you to carry everything alone and what that means for you today. Stay with me. At some point, you started to believe that God expected more from you than you could handle, that being faithful meant being strong all the time, that trusting meant never stopping, that resting was almost a mistake. But let me tell you something clearly now. God never asked you to be exhausted. You demand more of yourself than God demands of you. You demand of yourself a strength He never demanded, a performance He never asked for. And while you try to be enough, you forget something fundamental. God didn't call you to be the sustainer of your own life. You are not the foundation of everything. You are not the guarantee of tomorrow. You are not the one who keeps the world standing. When you try to occupy that place, the price comes in the form of exhaustion, anxiety, and guilt. God is not impressed by how much you endure. He cares about how much you trust. And trusting sometimes means stopping. Stopping without having everything solved. Stopping without having all the answers, stopping even when afraid, because resting is not abandoning responsibilities. It's recognizing limits. In the next point, we'll talk about something very important. Resting is not giving up on life. Don't go away. When you hear the word rest, maybe something inside you gets scared, because resting in your head sounds like giving up, like neglecting, like letting things fall apart. But resting is not abandoning. You don't stop being responsible because you stop for a while. You don't lose commitments because you respect your limits. In fact, what harms your life the most is not rest. It's accumulated fatigue. Fatigue makes you make more mistakes, get more irritated, make decisions at the limit. Have you noticed this? Resting isn't about leaving life. It's about returning to it whole. It's about stopping to recover strength, clear your mind, listen to your heart. You continue paying bills. You continue caring for those you love. You continue being responsible, but now without punishing yourself for it. God doesn't call you to abandon what is yours. He calls you not to abandon yourself in the process. And perhaps today, the step of faith that God expects from you isn't to do more, but to take a break. In the next point, we'll talk about the fear that appears exactly when you think about stopping. Stay with me. When you think about stopping, your body relaxes, but your mind goes on alert. Because stopping activates deep fears, fear of running out of money, fear of losing control, fear of disappointing someone, fear of discovering that you are not as indispensable as you believe. And then something silent happens, almost imperceptible. You start to confuse effort with existence, as if resting were a mistake, as if stopping meant disappearing. And every time the weight increases, you adjust your shoulders, take a deep breath, and tell yourself that you can endure a little longer, just a little longer. Because that's how you learn to be necessary. Solving, holding on, sustaining, even when no one explicitly asked, even when the cost was internal. Slow, accumulated, and the more you endure, the more the world expects you to endure, until this role ceases to be something you do and becomes something you are. And abandoning it seems dangerous, as if without the weight, there's nothing solid left to offer, only silence and the fear of not being enough. And the problem isn't strength. It never was. The problem is when it becomes the only language you know, when everything you feel needs to be swallowed, organized, resolved before it can truly be felt. You learn to function even when tired, to smile even when empty, to keep going even when wounded, and with time, you start to believe that value is resistance, that love is usefulness, that belonging is constant surrender, without pause, without fair exchange. And every time you think about letting go a little, guilt appears, saying that someone will fall, that something will crumble, that you are failing, so you stay. Secure resolve, once again, not because you want to, but because you don't know who you are when you're not doing it. But there's a more delicate truth hidden there. You weren't made to prove your worth by how much you endure, nor to exist only when you are strong. To exist is also to be able to stop, to be able to say no. I know, I can't, not now, and continue being worthy, continue being important. The weight you carry doesn't define your size. It only reveals how much you've forgotten yourself along the way. And perhaps the hardest step isn't continuing to endure, but allowing your identity not to depend on it. Allowing your value to exist even in rest, even in pause, even in the moment you let go and breathe, without needing to justify anything to anyone. But let me tell you something that might hurt, and at the same time set you free. You are important before you are useful. You are not worth how much you produce, nor how much you support, nor how much you solve. You are worth it because you are a child, because you are human, because you exist. When you rest, you don't lose value. You just stop defining yourself through tiredness. Perhaps the fear of stopping is, deep down, the fear of letting go of an identity that cost you dearly to build. In the next point, we will talk about rest as a real act of faith, not theoretical, but lived. Don't go away. Many people think that faith is about continuing, even when exhausted. It's about persisting. It's about enduring. It's about never stopping. But faith, in practice, is often the opposite of that. Faith is stopping when everything inside you says that just one more effort would solve it. Resting is saying, I did what was within my reach. Now, what doesn't depend on me, I surrender. This is difficult because it requires real trust. While you are doing, running, solving, you feel you still have some control. But when you stop, the control disappears, and then only one question remains. Do I truly trust God, or do I only trust while I can control? Resting is a silent declaration. God, I am not the savior of this story. I am not the foundation of everything. I am not the one who guarantees tomorrow. And that is not weakness. That is humility. You don't rest because everything is resolved. You rest because you trust in the one who continues working even when you stop. Perhaps the greatest step of faith you can take today is not to do more, but to stop for a while. In the next and final point, I want to walk with you through a simple, honest prayer for those who carry everything and need to learn to truly rest. Stay with me. Perhaps, after all this, you still don't know exactly how to rest. You understand with your head, but your heart is still tense. So let's not try to explain anything else now. Let's just stop together. If you can, wherever you are, relax your shoulders. Take a deep breath. You don't need to close your eyes. You don't need to do anything special. Just being here is enough. Now, if you allow me, I will pray with you. And if any word makes sense, let it settle inside, without arguing, without correcting. God, we are tired. Tired of trying to handle everything. Tired of holding on to what we can't control. Tired of living in fear of stopping. Enviar feedback, Paineis lateres historico salvas. The Lord knows the weight each one carries. He sees what no one else sees. The sleepless nights, the silence before the day begins, the strength required when the body asks for a break. He knows the bills, the deadlines, the numbers that weigh on the mind, the decisions that cannot be postponed. He knows the people who depend on us, children, parents, entire families sustained by daily choices. He knows the responsibilities that cannot wait, commitments made, promises made, paths that need to be kept firm. Nothing goes unnoticed before him. every hidden effort, every tear held back, every step taken even with fear. And before this weight, he remains present, attentive, constant, sustaining when strength seems to fail, silently reminding us that no burden is carried alone, that every burden seen by him finds care, direction, and support at the right time. The Lord also knows the weariness that accumulates, not only in the body, but in the soul. He perceives when a smile is an effort, when courage is a choice, when continuing seems harder than stopping. He knows the recurring thoughts, the returning worries, the scenarios the mind creates, the fear of not being enough. He knows the heart that tries to be strong, even when everything calls for rest. Even so, he offers peace. Not as the absence of problems, but as a presence that calms, like a voice that says in silence, "Continue, I am here." He renews the breath little by little, step by step, without haste, respecting the rhythm of those who carry much, and in this gentle renewal, he strengthens hope, reorganizes the interior, and sustains the journey with silent grace. The Lord knows the tomorrow that has not yet arrived, and therefore takes care of today. He knows where each road leads, each choice made, each door that opens, each necessary weight. Nothing escapes his control. Even when everything seems uncertain, even when the answers are not, they come now. He acts in the invisible, prepares solutions, aligns encounters, and guards the heart of those who trust. Therefore, the burden finds rest, anxiety finds repose, and the soul finds shelter, not through the absence of challenges, but through the certainty of his presence. A presence that sustains, guides, and protects, and a presence that remains when everything wavers, and that leads with firm, gentle, constant love until peace is fully established in perfect time, under the faithful care of the Lord. Today we don't ask you for answers. We don't ask you for guarantees. We only ask you for rest. Teach us to stop without guilt, to trust without fear, to rest even when everything is not resolved. We surrender now what no longer fits within us, the fear of lacking, the fear of losing, the fear of failing, and in this peace that we receive through faith, something within us slows down. The heart that once beat so fast begins to find its rhythm, and the mind, so accustomed to the noise, gradually learns to rest, because this peace demands no explanations. It asks for no guarantees. It demands no strength. It simply makes itself present, gentle, constant, like a whisper that says, "You don't need to sustain everything alone. You don't need to foresee every step. There is a greater care surrounding what you cannot control." And when this truth descends from the mind to the heart, something changes. The weight lessens, the breath deepens, and the silence ceases to be empty. It becomes a refuge, a safe place where the soul learns to trust, even without understanding everything, even without immediate answers, because the peace that comes from above remains, even when circumstances don't change. And then we rest, not because everything is resolved, but because we are no longer alone. There is a presence that sustains us when our strength fails. There is an invisible hand that guides us when the path seems confusing. And in this silent surrender, we learn that faith is not the absence of fear. It is walking despite it, with our hearts supported by something greater, something eternal, something firm. This peace doesn't eliminate the questions, but it teaches us to live even with them, without haste, without despair, trusting that each step will be cared for, each tear will be seen, each sigh will be heard. And in this deep rest, the soul finds a place, finds meaning, finds direction, even when tomorrow still seems distant. That's why we remain here, in silence, receiving, letting this peace envelop us entirely. Peace that doesn't depend on results, nor on control, nor on human certainties, but is born from trust, the trust of one who knows they don't walk alone, the trust of one who surrenders what weighs them down and remains with what strengthens them. This peace guards the heart, calms the thoughts, sustains hope, and even when the world demands haste, it teaches us to wait. When fear screams, it responds with presence, and so we continue, step by step, breath after breath, enveloped by a peace that remains, that protects, that guides, today, now, and in everything what's still to come. If you felt something different now, a relief, a desire to cry, or just a little more calm, don't rush it. Enviar feedback paineus laterais. Historico salvas rest doesn't shout. It arrives slowly. Now, let me close this time with you in a simple and true way. If nothing around you has changed, that's okay. Maybe the bills are still there, the responsibilities too. People still need you. But if something has changed inside, even if it's just a little, that already matters. Resting isn't waiting for life to get easier. It's deciding not to carry everything alone, even when it's heavy. You weren't made to hold up the world. You weren't created to be the foundation of everything. You were created to trust. And trusting isn't the absence of fear. It's walking even with fear, knowing that you're not alone. Maybe you can't stop completely today, but maybe you can stop for a few minutes. Maybe you can sleep a little better. Maybe you can let go of a worry, and that's already faith in action. You don't need to prove anything to God. You don't need to show strength. You don't need to endure a little longer. He doesn't call you to resist until you break. He calls you to rest before that. When you turn off this video, life goes on. But take this with you. You can do what is within your reach and entrust the rest to God. You can be responsible without being a prisoner of tiredness. You can rest without feeling guilty. And maybe tonight, when you lie down, your mind will still try to race. Enviar feedback. If this happens, remember, you're not late. You haven't failed. You're not alone. Rest. God continues to care, even when you stop. If this video brought you some relief, if at any point you felt seen, understood, welcomed, stay here. This channel exists for those who carry too much, for those who are strong for everyone else, but almost never for themselves. If you want, subscribe now. Not out of obligation, but as a reminder. You don't have to walk alone. Here, we don't run, we don't fake strength. We learn to rest one step at a time. If you feel it in your heart, leave a comment below. You don't need to explain your story. It can just be a simple phrase like, "Today I need to rest." That's not showing off, it's honesty. And if you know someone who supports everything alone, who never stops, who never complains, share this video. Sometimes, the greatest care you can offer is to remind someone that they too can rest. The next video is already on the screen. Click. I'll see you there.